So do you want to, Abraham, do you want to say anything or do you want us to start?
I would just say I'm delighted to see so many faces that I haven't seen before. And this is a true testimony of people speaking from the heart as opposed to having a sales product. There are lots of people in the business of a place for mom. Yeah. And it's all about money. So this is the right kind of program for us, and we thank you so much.
Thank you. Hi, Tony.
Hello.
So the book we're dealing with here is A Beginner's Guide to the End, and it's by B.J. Miller and Shoshana Berger. And it's really an important book, and it's very readable. It's not the type of book you sit down and read at one time because there's so much information in it. But it does go through the process of the decisions you have to make, like the paperwork you have to do before living wills, that kind of thing. And then it talks, which I think is really an incredibly valuable part. It talks about how to interact with the medical community. And that's the part that we really are not as familiar with, especially in the context of dying. So I think that's extremely valuable. And also in the book, in the back of the book, there's a reference area and it goes by chapter. So if you want more information to help you like write a living will or something, there are reference points there that will send you to places that will flush out these ideas. So that's the lay of the land. So let me tell you about one of the authors, that's B.J. Miller. Maybe you've heard his story. He was a student at Princeton, and he was a sophomore. And his friends, he and his friends were kind of hanging out in Princeton. I'm hearing some noise. Can everyone mute themselves? Or Jerry, can you do a mute? Thank you. So they were hanging out in Princeton one night and just kind of figuring out what they could do. And then they saw the Dinky, which is a little train that goes from Princeton to Princeton Junction, so you can catch the New Jersey Transit. And there was a ladder in the back, so they decided to climb up it. And BJ was the first one to climb up. And when he did that, there was electricity that arced from the power lines to his watch. And he was hit with 11 volts of 11,000 volts of electricity. And as a result,
You're okay with that?
he lost an arm and he lost both legs below the knee. And he was obviously in the hospital for a long time. He had to go through rehab. When he was done with all of that, he finished his program, his undergraduate work at Princeton, and he went on to become a physician. I don't know how he got through medical school, but he did. And he became a palliative care and hospice physician. So what's so interesting about him is he's been on both sides of the equation. He's been a patient and he's been he's a caregiver. So he really understands the process completely. Diane will tell you about Shoshana.
Shoshana's father, when he was 73 years old, was diagnosed with dementia. And he was very depressed, which of course exacerbated the dementia. Shoshana's stepmother and Shoshana became the victims of the medical community. And every time they tried to cure him in some way, which of course we know that dementia is not really curable, he ended up in the hospital. And it got so bad that finally his stepmother agreed, her stepmother agreed to put him into hospice care. And it was very difficult for Shoshana because she became the parent to her father. So she had a very difficult time. And this experience made her wish that she had a guide like the one in this book to help her get through that time. And so she paired up with BJ to write this book that would hopefully help other people.
Great. And so why did you decide to do this, Diane?
Okay. Okay. There aren't a lot of things that would force me to go this far out of my comfort zone. And this book is one of them. Here's why. In the late 1990s, when I was in my 50s, my mother and my brother Joseph both died within 2 weeks of each other. And 2 years later, my mother-in-law and my son Stephen died as well. During that time, I was on such a roller coaster. I was whiplash in a way that I was completely unprepared for. What am I up to?
You're doing fine.
I have to look at my notes just to make sure I'm not missing anything. And that's when I became a hospice volunteer. And I did that for a few years. I'll add to that story a conversation I had with Stephen when my mom and my brother were diagnosed. We were having lunch together alone, and he said to me, "Mom, know this. I was with a friend of mine. She gave me the privilege of being in the room when she had her baby. And I have been with friends of mine who gave me the privilege of being with them when they died. And the air in the room is exactly the same. The energy, the veil between the worlds is so thin and so precisely the same in both experiences that is quite remarkable." And I remind myself about that all the time.
I got interested in this book because, well, it started over 30 years ago when I lived in Connecticut. I was a freelance writer and I was doing work for Connecticut Hospice. I was doing promotional activities, marketing, press releases, and I wrote a PSA for the radio. They were having an event, kind of an awareness thing so people could understand what hospice was and what it was about to do. And they had a rabbi, Earl Grolman, who was coming from Boston to give this talk. And believe me, I was not into this. It was a cold, rainy night. And the last thing I wanted to do was go to this event and hear a rabbi talk about death. But when I went there, Earl Grolman, he's written many books. He since has died, but he had written a book about talking about death to children and ourselves. That was the name of it. And it was so inspiring. He was so personable, and the talk was so intimate, and he was so sensitive about the process that it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. And it helped me to get more comfortable with death and the idea of death. So when my parents were dying, I at least had some familiarity. There was something I could fall back on, and it was very helpful. And as Carl Jung has said, death is as psychologically as important as birth. And like birth, it is a central part of life. We should think about death not as an end, but a goal. So we're going to give our presentation. And if you have any questions that come up while we're talking about things, just jot them down because we'll have a Q&A at the very end of the talk. So I would appreciate that. Thank you. Diane.
I want to add something about why and how I came to this. For the last number of years, I've been wondering often why our culture we don't talk about death. We do everything possible. The one thing that binds us all, that it's definitely something we're all going to experience, for ourselves and even for others that we witnessed for, we just refuse to talk about it. And that's one of the reasons why when I found this book, I became a cheerleader for the book. It just is, they address all the practical things in such a wonderful way. And I realized when I was preparing for this that as Jews, and probably some other religions as well, but as Jews, we practice the process of dying, the end of life process, every year. During the month of Elul, right through Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we reevaluate the year, we make amends, we return to our core values if we've compromised them in any way, and resolve relationships. And we even go so far as to wear white during the holidays that mimics the shroud that we wear when we're buried. So it's all there. It's what we do every year. We would be then evaluating our lives. There would be a life review, what the authors call in the book a life review, as opposed to a year review. And all of the steps that we do during Elul and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are just expanded to address a whole lifetime of living.
Yeah, to emphasize the fact that we, as a culture, try to avoid death, you can see that there are many books about giving birth, but there are many fewer about dying and the process of dying. And death is a part of life. It's not a stealing of life. It's a package deal. If you don't confront it and wrestle with it, you are alienating yourself from your own nature. Death is a part of life, not the antithesis of life. So where do we start, Diane?
Well, there's work to be done. Rule number 1, don't leave a mess. And this includes your stuff and your relationships. Clean up your house, downsize, right size, and give things away. And if you're giving something away, you don't need or want it, but you know someone, a friend or a family member that you think would enjoy having it, or has expressed an appreciation for it, remarked how much they thought it was beautiful or whatever. So give it to them. Give it to them now so that you can watch them enjoy. I do want to tell this story, but I think I put it someplace else, but I'll tell you now. My mom and my sister Paulette, who's with us today, have done a remarkable job with this. Before my mother died, she had her 4 children come on a Sunday afternoon, no spouses, no kids, no grandchildren. And she said, I want you to write down all of my things that you would like to have. And of course, she said, take your time. About 20 minutes later, she said, all right, everybody, I want to hear the list, because if 2 of you have it, we were 4 kids. If 2 of you have it on the list, I want you to talk about it now, because I don't want you to fight later. So we did. We talked about it. Some of us had multiple, each of us with the same item on the list. And we said, well, I don't know. It's really not that important to me. You can have it. Or the other way around. No, this is really important to me. So, okay, we figured it out. And she made us put it in an envelope and seal it for when the time came. It was quite the experience. So we took that opportunity at that time to give her a living will to fill out. And she was perfectly comfortable with it. We weren't sure if she would be. She went so far in telling us what dishes to use for her Shiva. She didn't want any paper, no plastic utensils, no paper napkins. She told us exactly what to do. And that, for me, was her way of saying, I'm okay with this. I got this. And my sister, God bless her, she has her own way of doing it. I went to visit her a couple of months ago, and she's telling me about how her grandchildren and her children were admiring a certain painting or a certain work of art. And she's an artist, so she has beautiful sculptures and pottery in her house that she's made herself. And she put little Post-its behind the paintings or under the pottery with the name of the person who gets it. I mean, and I understand, and I'm sorry, Paulette, I got to say this. I understand that not so very long ago, she had a private conversation with each of her kids as well.
Right.
This is all not just encouraged. They give us steps in the book of how to do this. It gets us comfortable with the idea of doing these things.
Great.
I think I'm done.
Good. That was great. So the next thing is to leave a mark. What do you want your legacy to be? And when Kay's brother died, he was a very talented man in many different ways, but one was art. And at his memorial service, mourners had the opportunity to take a piece of artwork that he had created as a memento, as a keepsake, and as a way of taking a piece of him with them. And that day I decided I wanted to be able to leave something. And it was the day that I started taking my photography seriously. So, you have to figure out what works for you. What do you want to leave behind? Is it money? Is it a scholarship or an endowment? Is it your story, a letter, an ethical will? At the back of the book, there's a list of resources organized by chapter. I mentioned this before, that will give you detailed guidance on how you can help you make these decisions. But it's important to think about now.
I just want to add that Louise's photography is fabulous. I have a piece hanging in my bedroom, and I love it.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you.
Okay, so here's the main, I don't know if you call this hard things, but practical, really practical. There's paperwork. Surprise, surprise. There's an advance directive, a durable power of attorney for your finances, a will, and a revocable power of attorney, just to mention a few. I'm going to focus on the advance directive and the living will because they're really pretty much the same in most states. Each state has their own rules about this, but the living will and advance directive are pretty much the same. And what you're basically doing is picking a person who will make decisions for you, who, if you're unable to make decisions. The first thing you should know is that this changes over time. So when circumstances change, and yes, it's a good idea to do it no matter what age you are, but just know that it is not a one and done. As circumstances change, you want to revisit these decisions. So just know that that's part of our responsibility to do that. You have to have conversations with this person that you choose. Make sure they know that you're choosing them. Make sure they know what your wishes are and understand them and respect them, and that they will actually do what you want them to do, whatever that is.
And share the information with your family.
Yes, and it's very important you share that information in the family, like my mother said, so there won't be any fights, or maybe, hopefully. Shoshana's story is very revealing about this and a little bit surprising at the outcome. She asked her dad what he wanted at his end, when he was actually going through the dying process. And he said that he did not want any extraordinary measures done, that he just wanted to peacefully die. So she then turns to her stepmother and says, "Did you hear him?" And she said, "Yes." And then she asked her stepmother, "And what are you going to do?" Her stepmother said, "Well, I love him too much not to try to keep him in this world. I want to do extraordinary measures." So she then turned back to her father and said, "Well, Dad, did you hear her?" And he said, "Yes, I did." And she said, "Well, what are your instructions?" He said, well, if that's what she wants, I'll do it. So, so you just never know how things are going to work out or why. He says, I love her. And if that's going to make her more comfortable after I go and she won't be having any regrets, then that's what I want to do. So I got to say, I was a little surprised at the outcome, but that's why it's really, really important to have these conversations.
There's a whole chapter in the book that covers the writing a will, a living will, advanced healthcare directive. And it's very comprehensive. But it's better to do it now before you're in a critical situation than later. You'll be thinking more clearly now. It'll be more theoretical. It'll be easier to do. But when you get a diagnosis that is going to take a lot of work and energy, it's not the time to be writing these things. It makes it much, much harder to do. So what do you do once you get a diagnosis? The first thing you should do is just pause. You don't have to make any decisions right away. It's something that you can live with and think about. You can call a friend and talk about it. You can go for a walk, but you don't have to just immediately jump in when you hear something. I know when I hear news like that, I kind of hear the ocean waves and going in my ear. It's hard to take in information. So it's best to just sit and ponder for a bit and absorb what you've heard. And one of the most valuable things in the book I found were questions that you ask a healthcare team. It's important to gain clarity about what the treatment is, and the consequences of the treatment. And these are the questions you should be asking. Excuse me. What is the treatment meant to do? Is it meant to cure me, extend my life, increase my comfort? What effect can I expect from the treatment? How long will it last? What can be done about that? What does success look like for this treatment? Is there any risk in trying it? Can I stop it once I've started? How long until I know if the treatment is working? What are the alternatives? What happens if I don't do that? Should I consider hospice? If not now, when? Would you be surprised if I died from this illness within a year? If your answer is no, should we rethink hospice soon? And then there's palliative care. Palliative care treats the suffering of the individual. It's pain management. It doesn't cure the disease. It can be used in conjunction with medical care. So you can be going through chemo or whatever and still have palliative care to deal with the pain that you're experiencing. Palliative care versus hospice care. Palliative care is focused on relieving suffering and improving quality of life. But hospice care focuses on comfort and quality of life during the dying process. So you've acknowledged that you're in the process of dying and you're going to handle it as gracefully as possible. Diane?
The book actually goes into a list of 13 ways of dealing with the dying process. The first one they list is setting goals. And I think this is really an interesting step to take. I think it's good to think about this, maybe sooner than later, actually, and then to communicate it to the people who might help you do it. Maybe there is a restaurant you wanted to go to that you've never had a chance. Maybe it's a trip that you wanted to take, whether it's a big one or a little one, and see if it's possible to arrange it. Maybe it's some daily thing that you can arrange that gives you pleasure and comfort. Maybe you want to see somebody, visit someone that you haven't seen in a long time, or ask them to come visit you. It could be anything, but you have to think about it to know what that anything is and to communicate it to people so they might be able to help you to do it.
The next is feel the good stuff too. It seems to be human nature that we have kind of the superstition that if we change our attitude from just dealing with the disease to taking in positive things, that when the disease catches up with us, we're going to really crash. But it's good to incorporate the good things every day in your life. As B.J. Miller says, take your breaks where you find them. So if you can identify things that make you happy, that make you feel good, make sure you incorporate those into your daily life, so that you make the process even more doable, more, I can't say enjoyable because I don't think it'll, but
Comfortable.
it's precious. The good stuff is precious, and we have to stop and really take that in.
One of the things they recommend is to pray or meditate. And we all know that in some way when we do these things, it quiets our minds and it gives us perspective. It gives us a sense of peace. It helps us to get in touch with the ideas that there is something greater than ourselves and that something exists beyond death.
Be grateful. Gratitude is a byproduct of appreciation. So start taking life in. I remember when one of our founding members at KHN, Michael Manuel, was dying. He spent a lot of time sitting on his patio and just appreciating the spring as the flowers came out and the trees filled in. And he turned to me and he said, "This is the most beautiful spring I've ever seen." And just the idea, I mean, here we are in spring, and you can see how meaningful it is just to stop and really drink up the beauty that is around us. We're fortunate that we live in such a beautiful place, and it's easy to do that. But it helps you to appreciate life and to appreciate it as long as you can.
The book tells, well, the authors tell the story in the book about a man named Len. When he was diagnosed with cancer, he didn't blame anyone. He didn't blame himself. He didn't feel like a victim, and he didn't hide his fear and other emotions. He never lost his sense of, and I'm reading this because it's so important, wonder, curiosity, or joy. He cried at the drop of a hat, and he rolled with every emotion. He accepted all of it, and he couldn't wait to see what was coming next. That's tough. And importantly, Len had the same attitude when he was going through treatment. And I think for me, the takeaway from that story is that acceptance is not only for when you're out of options. It is a simple matter of seeing things the way they are, the reality. His openness also helped his family to get used to the idea of him dying. By the end of life, his sisters noted that the words like "when I'm dead," which everybody gets very upset about that, the words like "when I'm dead" had lost their taboo. Not having to dance around the subject was a relief for him and for his family. Okay, so what's up next? Love. Duh. Give it and receive it. I don't think I have to say more than that.
Okay. So relate to life in as many ways as possible. Don't isolate yourself. There is a story about Andrea, who had been battling cancer, and she made it into a metaphor that she used, that it was a war, and war is exhausting. So eventually, when she decided she had to, with her third reoccurrence of cancer, she decided to change her relationship with the cancer. So she gave it a name, Gus, and she found a toy made of yarn that looked like a goblin, but it had a big blue heart sewn on it. And she put it in her purse and carried it around with her. She would talk to Gus. She would cheer him on when the tumors were shrinking, and scold him when they were growing. So it helped her to kind of find a relationship with her cancer, and she could label her disease, and she didn't become her disease. The disease was part of what was happening to her. So it was a very creative way of dealing with a diagnosis. Am I next?
Yes.
Okay. B, which is be present. Patrick was a longtime patient with liver disease and prostate cancer. And he took a mindfulness-based stress reduction course and started meditating for 20 minutes a day. And if any of you have been meditating, you know it makes a difference. The change was obvious. He grew less reactive, less depressed, and more in control of himself, and more capable of handling what he could not control. Sitting still and following his breath, noticing but not reacting, gave him a kind of buffer. Mindfulness may involve sitting quietly with eyes closed and legs crossed, or it can just be gazing out a window and sitting with what is happening to you, or taking a stroll around the block. It can be anything that pulls your attention to the now, the life that's still here.
Going on, try to put things in, they recommend that we try to put things in perspective. In illness and disability, there is so much that can fall apart, but at the same time, it gives us an opportunity to reinvent ourselves. And besides, falling apart well is a skill that we can learn. And this is an opportunity for us to do that.
If you want to feel alive, pay attention to your senses. Your body tells you what's going on, and often we ignore that. But if you pay attention, you will know where you are. This is my favorite one, create. All humans are creative. If you just think about our day-to-day lives and how we improvise things come up unexpectedly, and we're able to improvise and cope and deal with things. We all have creativity in us, and creativity can provide an outlet. It can be writing a poem, planting a garden, cooking a meal, singing a song, or painting a mural, and can enrich our lives. It can also help us to deal with our emotional state, because when you create and you're coming from your subconscious mind, it really tells you a lot about yourself and where you're at. So creativity can be very healing and very positive.
Well, it's a good idea to get your laughs when you can. During the COVID epidemic, Saul and I would listen to the news, hear all the statistics all day long, whatever you turn on the radio or a podcast or the television, it was just coming at us. But every night before we went to sleep, we went on Netflix, we looked for the stand-up comic category, and we picked someone. Most of them we didn't even know or heard of, but we'd watch, We'd listen, we'd laugh, we'd giggle, or we'd say, no, this is not for me. And then we would go to sleep. But that was the last thing we would do before we went to sleep, and not hearing the news and all of the depressing things about the pandemic.
It's a great idea. We have to do that now.
Yes, yes, we do.
All
All
right.
right, you go. It's your turn.
Call a truce. Repressing your fears and anxiety doesn't make them go away. It just makes them haunt you. By facing up to our feelings and our fears, we have the ability to make fear something of a companion, which we can deal with, and it defangs the energy of fear. As fear becomes more familiar, it also becomes less scary, and it makes it easier to deal with.
Yeah, okay. Don't be afraid of grief. It's going to have its way with you one way or another. Probably best to embrace it and give it permission. Lean in. Let grief come and go unrestricted. That's my own personal.
It's not in the book.
No, it's not in the book. That's my own personal advice. And I want to touch on something that I learned when my brother Joseph was dying, and when I was being trained for hospice volunteering. I went to go see Joseph in the hospital, and it turned out that was the day that he died. And he was seemingly sleeping. I walked over to the bed and I touched his hand. And as I did, he startled. It was a pretty big startle. And of course, I felt guilty right away, but he settled down. And while he was settling down, the nurse said to me, you know, it takes work and energy to leave this world. And it gave me a whole different perspective on being a patient that is leaving the world.
Yeah.
It's called actively dying. And doctors and nurses pretty much know when someone is actively dying, and they're focused. They're focused and working.
Yeah. By making death a homecoming, philosophers and prophets have attempted to help us keep our lives in perspective and to remind us that our decisions matter because our time is limited. Dying is a natural process, but you'd never know it from the way our culture talks about death. We actually call it failure. Her health is failing. He failed treatment. If you believe what you read, the entire enterprise of aging is optional. Eat kale, drink red wine, walk 10,000 steps each day. If we can't beat death, then clearly our character, our faith isn't strong enough. Death is part of life, not its antithesis. The more familiar we become with the process and the more control we have over our options, the easier the process will be. So does anyone have any questions or comments? Oh. Miriam?
Well, I was also a hospice volunteer. I trained in New Hampshire. And as soon as I finished the program, my husband became terminally ill, and he was my first and only patient.
Wow.
And there was a member of the medical team that was incredibly cruel to me. And the question is, what do you do with that? And I'll tell you what I did with it. And I think it was perfect. It was a social worker. And she had arranged for my husband to go home before he was supposed to go home. It was on a freezing cold night in February, and she had arranged with a hospice group that wasn't mine. And when I complained to her about it, she says, well, it's too late to change it now. There's nothing I can do. And I was hysterical, totally out of control. My husband had only been sick for 18 days, and I knew he was going to die. And I called up the head of my hospice group, and she took care of it. And when we got home the next day, where it was much warmer and there was snowflakes falling, and Bill just had his arms out wide and was catching snowflakes on his tongue. When we got home, I said to the two people who were my major helpers, I want to take notes as to what happened. I can't deal with it now, but I will later. And they wrote down what had happened. And 3 months after Bill died, I pulled that piece of paper out of the file and I wrote a letter to the CEO of the hospital. I got a call back the day that letter was received. And I found out a month later when I was in a bereavement group, when I talked about this a little bit, and the woman who headed the bereavement group said she was fired the next day.
Wow.
Oh,
They had been trying to get rid of her for ages because she was terribly abusive to people who were helpless. But I wasn't helpless, even though I was at the time not capable of dealing with things very effectively. But I was able to, in my brain, formulate a plan so that I could deal with it later. And that was it. She was gone.
That's impressive that you were able to be that proactive.
yeah.
So it's important, if you find someone who is not doing what you want, look for someone who is on your side. And another,
Mr. Rogers, look for the helpers.
yeah, I'll try to make this quick. I got a call from a man by the name of Judah Folkman, who was a world-renowned cancer researcher. And I had a connection through him through a synagogue. And he offered me his very new and innovative treatment. And I listened, and I didn't think that it was going to be correct for my husband, because I knew more of the details of how extensive his disease was. And I listened carefully to him and one of his assistants, and I made the decision. I did not talk to anyone, none of his relatives, none of my friends, nor to Bill. I made the decision personally to just let it go. And I think it's important to have confidence in yourself. I mean, I knew Bill better than anyone else. And I knew that I had at least one sister-in-law who was a doctor who would have interfered horribly, but I didn't tell anyone. I just made the decision, and that was it. So it's important to have confidence in yourself when you're going through this.
It's a great point. Sharon?
Hi. First of all, I want to say what a wonderful, wonderful presentation. And this is more about what your my children gave me this for Christmas about a
Can you
couple of
hold it
years
up?
ago.
Can you say it?
Can you see it? And
No. What's it say?
No,
it's called Answers to Your Questions.
Okay.
My children all had questions about my life growing up. And so each of them asked me different questions. And this was the gift. They said, Mom, now you have to write it in a book. So every chapter is a question that one of the children asked me.
It's entries over a whole year.
It took a year. It took a year to do this. I have no financial interest in it. It's done by Storyworth, but it was a gift for my children. And it is now a gift to my grandchildren because we got copies made for all the children and the grandchildren. It's a wonderful thing to leave your children, particularly if they have questions that you've never taken time to answer. So they write the questions and you have to answer it.
It's great.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
I also got this as a gift from my grandchildren, and it's called Grandmother, I Want to Hear Your Story. And it's a bunch of really personable questions with lots of places to write your answers. And then you give it back to the grandchildren. It's your legacy, and it's heartfelt and something that you've spent time thinking about. What do they need to know about me that they don't know? You know, they only know me as a 70-year-old, 80-year-old person. They don't know that the legacy of the arc of my life.
Anyone else have any questions or comments?
I'd just like to say that my niece did that story for me because her mother died from Alzheimer's. So she didn't really have the opportunity to ask her mother the questions. So when I wrote that, my sister was 6 years older than I was. So I tried to tell my story, but I also tried to interlace my sister with that so that it was really a story about stories about me and my sister. And I think my niece really appreciated that opportunity. And thank you for a great presentation.
Yeah.
I just put the name of Storyworth into the chat. If anybody's interested, look it up.
It's also in the back of the book. It's
Okay.
referenced. Ginny?
That's what I wanted.
Oh, okay. Miriam?
I gave a copy, well, someone gave me a copy from Earl Groman, Living When a Loved One Has Died.
Mhm.
It was extremely helpful. And the way he wrote it, in the beginning few pages, it's large print. There's just a little bit on each page, which is basically all you can absorb. And it gets, this print gets smaller and there's more on each page as you go through it. I have given that book to at least 20 people who have lost a dear one, and it's excellent, and I highly recommend it. Living When a Loved One Has Died.
Great, thank you. Any other comments?
Yes, I want to just report on an experience I had. A close friend years ago that didn't have a will. I already had an extensive, the whole share. And I said to him, look, tell me about what you want and I'll write this for you. And I did. I wrote up everything. He said, all right, now it's time for you to sign it. He says, no, I'm not ready. Why aren't you ready? Are you thinking that if you sign this, you will die? And his answer was yes. There's this kind of irrational fear attaches. It's sort of like Woody Allen says, I have nothing against dying. I just don't want to be there.
There's a story about an insurance salesman that was trying to sell life insurance, and he couldn't get through a presentation without being interrupted a million times when he would say something about someone dying, and that's why they needed it. And it would always be, he would always have to add, God forbid, a million times. God forbid, a million times. So he finally started doing this. He'd walk into a house and he'd say, okay, I'm going to talk to you. Let's say, God forbid, a million times, once, right now. So you don't have to keep repeating it through the entire conversation. Let me tell you about life insurance. So, it's true that people get very uncomfortable, I'll be polite, about references to death, to their own death. We don't even use the word. What do we say? We say someone's lost, someone passed, or I lost my husband. I didn't lose him. I know where he is. I know what happened. It's like, okay. And especially from a child's point of view, think about if they hear these words, they don't know what we're talking about. I mean, we've normalized so many other conversations in our lives and words in our lives that really talk about the real thing, like breasts and other body parts and other life experiences.
Right.
But somehow or another, we just can't seem to bring ourselves to say death. Who else?
Here.
Is the author
Very-
Jewish as well?
No.
I don't know.
No, Miller isn't,
he's
I don't
not.
think. I don't
Okay.
know. It could go
No.
either way.
I see.
Okay.
Florian.
Is there,
Oh,
it's okay. Is there any Jewish like authors that have written about death? Do you know?
I'm sure there.
I'm
Well,
sure-
Earl Groman's Jewish. He's a
Okay.
rabbi. He was a rabbi.
there is
Okay.
also a Jewish organization called the Shomer Collective that really, it's a little bit like let's have dinner and talk about death is actually something that they do. So if you go online and you Google Shomer Collective, it's an organization that's obviously Jewish because Shomer is the name of the person that sits with the body from the time someone dies until they're buried. Florian, you wanted to say something.
Yeah. Right, first of all, thanks for letting me in and joining to this wonderful presentation. So I'm very grateful. Actually, so I've been working with Diane in this A Year to Live course that we've taken over the past like 12 months. Actually, the course finished back in January, but still we're still in touch. And the whole year was about like it was a whole year long meditation on death. And I really like revisited so many topics that we discussed over the weeks and months in today's presentation. So I'm very grateful. And actually, it was an online course. But finally, I got to meet the first person from our cohort in presence last week in Toronto, so it was really good. And I just have a little like story to share about that encounter. So it was one person from the group whose name is Amna, my wife Dalal, and myself. And Dalal kept hearing about this course over the weeks and the months because I was always trying to engage her, and she actually signed me up for this course. So a year to live. And we were just getting to know each other in person and stuff. And at some point, so my wife is an anesthesiologist. So essentially, she puts people asleep when they need to go through surgery or delivery or other stuff. And one thing she mentioned during our encounter is that, the way people fall asleep, like the way they prepare before receiving the treatment, the drug, and the way they like sometimes some people need sedatives, sometimes people are very comfortable. So the way they transition from being fully awakened to the numbness of anesthesia is actually the way they're going to wake up. So that's why they use like this kind of pre-treatment sedative or other things, because the way they wake the way they go through the process is the way they're going to wake up. And we instantaneously with Amna we thought like that's a metaphorical, that's a metaphor of like how we prepare for death in a way. And all the preparation and all the talk that we've been having today and last year, it was all about preparing for death. And if we prepare for it, like and reach for it and see as a goal, and maybe like you mentioned, Diane, that maybe just try to laugh before you sleep. Maybe it's gonna help for whatever metaphysical realm we wake up to. So that's just what I wanted to say. But I'm very grateful.
I agree.
And I really enjoyed, all your insight, Diane. It's been a wonderful journey with you. So thank you again.
Thank you, Florian. Thank you so much. Who's next? I have to say, there are times when I go to Weight Watcher workshops over the years.
True confessions.
Well, it is what it is. And sometimes when I check to see how many people are on, and I do this virtually, how many people are on the Zoom meeting, it could be 50, it could be 25, it could be 10. No matter how many people, when the workshop facilitator asks a question and wants people to respond, no matter, everyone is silent. Suddenly everyone becomes mute. I don't understand. There's got to be something that you're thinking about. Share it with us. And if not, that's okay too.
I don't want to be mute. This presentation is solid gold. It is a gift for all of us. And with this recording becomes a permanent resource for us and all the people that follow. I mean, I'm already thinking about who do I want to invite to share this exquisite experience. We thank you from the bottom of my heart. It is beyond all my expectations. Amazing. Thank you.
And I
You're
would
very
like
welcome.
to hear from Rabbi Janine, the Jewish interpretation of death and dying, and review with us the rituals and the
Muted.
choices that we should be thinking of. Is that possible, Abraham?
She can't hear you.
We had talked about this. This is how I got involved.
Everybody's muted.
No, it might be our finger.
Because
Okay.
I wanted to start a group that would be talking about death. And the rabbi was very interested in it. And she was supposed to be here, but she had another commitment that came up. But I think that if we asked her, there's no reason why she wouldn't be willing to do it. I think it's a great idea, Susan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Any other comments before we sign off? Miriam?
Cremation is supposedly not part of the Jewish religion. I did have my husband cremated, and his ashes are in the Atlantic Ocean. And I told my nephew, he said, "Do we have to go back to the same place?" I said, "No, just put my ashes in anything that goes into the Atlantic Ocean. The Delaware River is fine." But there was something else that I wanted to say about this, and it just escaped me.
But the idea of cremation.
I know. Del Valle University was started by an Orthodox rabbi to
Right.
teach the Jews who were coming to this country how to farm. And
Right.
if you go into the old library at Del Valle, his office is still there. And in that office is the urn with his ashes. And I
Oh.
forget what the reason was for that he wanted to be cremated and have his ashes kept there. And on the fireplace, there are Hebrew letters in tile. And the librarian said to me, "I don't know what they mean." And I said, "Well, I do. It's Yeh or, let there be light."
Nice.
It's a
I
cool
should
place to
also
visit.
add in terms of the Jewish connection, that some students at, I can't remember which university, Maryland University, wrote a blessing for this upon the signing of an advance directive. I have it. It's pretty long, so I'm not going to get into it. But if someone wants it, of course, I'll give it to them. I'll gladly give it to them.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much. This is Roxanne. Thank you so much for your presentation and explaining so many things to me that I had absolutely never didn't really think about it for the future. And clearly it is something we do need to think about. And for all the people that were involved telling the stories also were really good to know. But thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You're
Thank
very
you.
welcome. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank everybody for participating and being willing to address this topic, since, as we said, our culture doesn't encourage that. But I think that a discussion on cremation and the Jewish attitude towards cremation and other rituals would be very valuable for us to have. I mean, we are an older congregation, and it's certainly a relevant topic. So, thank you all.
Thank you, all of
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
It was
Thank
great.
you.
I think you have plenty of time now to get to the CPR class if you're going.
Very appropriate.
Yes, very appropriate is right.
Bye.